so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness which creates and animates all things. After years of exploring this awe-inspiring truth on this podcast, I'm super excited to announce that we are now going even deeper down the rabbit hole on the new late-night style consciousness-elevating talk show called Optimistic, which features none other than you, the listeners. Optimistic is taped out of the epic, spaceship-esque 8-bedroom property we call the Mystic Manor that myself and the rest of the Optimistic crew now navigate reality from in Venice Beach, California. And you are invited to come experience a Mystic Manor immersion week with us. During your week-long stay, you'll enjoy unique workshops, chef-prepared meals, one-on-one time coaching and consulting with me, and even co-creating magic with me as a guest on both Optimistic and an episode of the Positive Head podcast. When I started this, my aim with these immersive retreats was to facilitate the ultimate spiritual upgrade and tune-up, so to speak, for our guests while providing them with one of the most memorable experiences of their lives. And I'm happy to say that as of this recording, every guest at the end of their trip so far has told me that they have had a profound and transformational experience at the Mystic Manor and that they definitely want to come back. All that being said, we only have a limited number of spots available between now and next July. And as of this recording, about half of those spots are already filled. So if there's any part of you that is screaming, yes, I want to come, I feel like I need to be there, go now and book a slot with me to discuss how we can put our heads together and make it happen at calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. I know for some people, there is also that little voice in their head saying, why not? I can't get off work. I can't afford it, and on and on and on. But, really Henry Ford, I think, said it best. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And I'm confident that where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm personally committed to doing everything in my power, including discounts and payment plans, to get you here if it is something that truly feels like a huge yes for you energetically and like you're meant to be here. Once again, the link to book time to discuss with me is calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. That's spelled calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. All one word, of course. And book in some time and look forward to seeing you soon here at the Mystic Manor.
All right, all you positive heads, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me today and tuning your beautiful brainwaves in. Today, I'm going to get into more of Caroline Myss's book, Sacred Contracts. And what's interesting for me today is that a topic came up this morning, and it's actually been coming up, I think, the last few days, just in different conversations about problems in life, and how we view our problems, and even just seeing the problem as a problem can be a problem, right? So if we can see our problems as opportunities, and instead of focusing on problems, finding solutions, because every problem has a solution, but you don't get to the solution by focusing on the problem. You get to the solution by figuring out what that could possibly be, what that solution is, right? And why I feel like this is an interesting thing that came up in my awareness is because when we understand, because I'm getting into archetypes today in this book, when we understand what our archetypes are and what these concepts are that we are working with within our own life, we can understand how we are viewing things, how we're experiencing things because of these chosen contracts. Then we can understand our life and our problem/solutions so much easier. And like I said on Tuesday, I think the study of archetypes is one of the most beneficial things we can do for ourselves in terms of our spiritual evolvement. The archetypes have been around for ages. We can go back to the Kabbalah. That is the study of archetypes. It is a lifelong study. All the ancient mystery schools and mystics, lifelong studies involving the archetypes. Alchemy is archetypal. Tarot, astrology, all archetypes, all different ways of helping us understand our spiritual path and how to evolve, how to actually go through the metamorphosis. We always talk about butterflies, right? That process of being a caterpillar, becoming goo, and turning into a butterfly. This concept of the hero's journey that we all go on in this life. So that's what we're going to get into today. And the main meat of what we're going to get into today is the 4 survival archetypes. We all have these archetypes, every single one of us. They're like main points in all of our lives. How we express them is different for each one of us. They're all extremely important to understand. And when we're thinking about our problems in life, we can look to these archetypes and understand what it is that we're working with within ourselves and how we can make better choices. So I think Caroline Myss does an absolutely beautiful job explaining these archetypes. She uses a lot of story, a lot of myth, a lot of different religious, traditional background. I mean, from every different tradition. So it's a really fun book to read through and read all the different stories. I mean, Jesus, Muhammad, Abraham, you name it. There's so much in this book. So I'm just going to actually get started with a little bit of chapter 3, which she talks about the stages of a sacred contract. And then we will get into the meat of those survival archetypes. So Evelyn Underhill, in her classic book, Mysticism, distilled the Enlightenment process into 5 stages. She called them the stages of awakening, purification, illumination, the dark night of the soul, and divine union. In the unfolding of the sacred contracts of the great spiritual masters, we can see a similar progression. These mystical sages represent an archetypal model of progression to soul clarity. That is, the capacity to recognize that the material contents and relationships of our physical world are here only as props or parts of our service to our contract. The stages by which the spiritual masters became aware of the nature of their contracts are the same as the 5 stages through which we must go. Indeed, the same resistance to what we might label the divine call that the prophets felt is evident in our own resistance to the inner voice of intuition. The difference is mainly one of degree. You may want to pause and reflect for a time on any promptings or coincidences or intuitions you've had over the years. Write them down in a journal or a notebook. Note whether they came to you in a dream, through a comment, warning, or compliment from a loved one or stranger, through the lyrics of a song or a feeling you got from music or nature, or through something you experienced or learned through work or a pastime. How did you react to these inklings at first? Did you welcome or ignore them or suppress them? Did you act on them? What happened afterward? The way you receive intuition or callings or guidance will help you determine the kinds of archetypal forces that are at work in your life and will ultimately help you discern your sacred contract. As with anything we learn, the stages generally overlap and continue to unfold throughout our life as we grow or develop a skill or insight. The stages are not strictly linear progression, but rather a continuous process of growth and unfoldment that you may go through a number of times in your life as you encounter new challenges or circumstances. So, this point that she made there about how our guidance comes to us is a really big one in figuring out what our archetypes are, right? So, for example, she said, maybe you get these inspirations or guidance through hearing a lyric in a song. Well, maybe that's because you have the artist archetype. That one's easy. So all of us are going to be different here, but that's one way to take a look at yourself and figure out what is that archetypal pattern that you have within you. And now we're going to get into those 4 archetypes that we all have within us. And it's chapter 4. Speaking archetypes, your 4 principal energy companions. And again, I'm going to skip around a little bit because there's a lot of material. Archetypes are your energy guides to your highest potential, the fulfillment of the 5 stages of your sacred contract. You have 4 constant archetypes at work in your life: the child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur. The child actually has many aspects, including the wounded or orphan child, to which many people relate, and the magical or innocent child, among others. Engagement with the magical child is rare, but it is pure delight to be in the company of someone who radiates that archetype. Sir George Trevelyan, who has been called the father of the New Age movement in England, was such a person. She tells a story here of a presentation that they were giving together, and at some point while they were speaking, he stopped and was just staring in the back of the room. And so she asked him what he was looking at, and he replied, well, the god Pan has just decided to join us. And so, of course, everyone in the room turned to look, and no one saw anything but just the back of the room. And so Caroline asked him, so what does he want? And he said, he simply just wants to join in the fun. And afterwards, when they were having dinner, she asked him how it could be that easy, or how he could see Pan and the spirits of the nature kingdom. And he said, oh, that's easy. I look through the imagination of my inner child. All children can see into that world when they are very young. The door between the worlds closes as you get older and begin to believe that there is no such thing. For George, this archetype and its imaginative world had become a companion. Although archetypes are patterns of influence that are both ancient and universal, they become quite personalized when they are part of an individual's own psyche. Since your sacred contract is embodied in a support system of 12 archetypes, perhaps the most advantageous way to think of them is as intimate companions. Actually, the nature of your archetypes is both intimate and impersonal. Viewed through the heart, they are personal enough to be called companions. Viewed with the mind, they are impersonal, symbolic patterns that serve in the energetic organization of your spiritual evolution. As I say in my workshops, a personal experience filtered through an impersonal or symbolic attitude creates a vastly different psychic chemistry from taking everything personally. Just as your archetypes have a dual nature, you too have the constant challenge of holding within yourself a personal heart and a symbolic mind. Don't misinterpret this statement to mean that all relationships and life experiences will be simple and painless if you just treat your interactions impersonally and impassively. That, of course, is nonsense. What we need to do is make conscious choices and take responsibility for ourselves, including our thoughts and attitudes. Working with your archetypal patterns is the best way I know to become conscious of yourself, the effects of your actions, and the need for choosing wisely every day. Current attitudes hold that our characters and personalities are formed during childhood through a combination of nature and nurture. Indeed, during the first 2 decades of life, we make our first promises to ourselves to provide for and protect ourselves. Many people have told me that as adolescents, they promised themselves that they would never be physically abused or humiliated again. Children make vows to themselves that they will become scientists, artists, or mothers, or simply find a way to become wealthy. These commitments are part of our path in the physical world. All are influenced by the 4 primary archetypes. During the first years of our lives, we come to realize that the quality of our physical lives depends on our sense of personal power, on our ability to survive. Long before we become emotionally and spiritually empowered, we must engage our personal power in the material world. We also begin to understand that we must deal with moral issues or suffer the consequences. In engaging with the physical world and the moral choices that present themselves, we develop self-esteem. This is the beginning of spiritual maturity. The 4 primary archetypes, the child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur, symbolize our major life challenges and how we choose to survive. Together, they represent the issues, fears, and vulnerabilities that cause us to negotiate away the power of our spirits within the physical world. They also come to represent spiritual strengths for dealing with real life and spiritual issues. These 4 archetypes are like the 4 legs of a table on which our sacred contract rests. The table legs represent our relationship to the ground beneath our feet and to the universal energy that supports our life. They might be straight or curved or embellished with carvings and images, depending on how these 4 archetypes work within our psyches during the course of our lives. But they need to be stable to support the weight of the tabletop, our life and mission. All 4 archetypes influence how we relate to material power, how we respond to authority, and how we make choices. These archetypal energies are neutral, and I must reinforce that point here because of the connotations of their names. Although it can be difficult to see how the victim, prostitute, and saboteur can provide us with powerful and supportive imagery, they do, and you will. You'll come to see how even the most common variant of the child archetype, the wounded child, can help you deal with your life today. These 4 archetypes are the intimate companions of your intuition. They make you conscious of your vulnerabilities, your fear of being victimized. They allow you to see how you sabotage your creative opportunities or abort your dreams. And in the future, they will become your allies in fulfilling opportunities and dreams. Your archetypes will become your guardians and will preserve your integrity, refusing to allow you to negotiate it away under any circumstance. Your archetypes can help you transcend the shadow belief that everyone has a price and allow you to see that you are not for sale. They will allow you to become completely self-reliant. Through them, you will come to see options where others see excuses. The richest reward in working with these survival archetypes, however, reveals itself in the manner in which your contract unfolds. While it is a given that you have contracts to meet certain people, it is not determined ahead of time what kind of interaction you will have with each of them. That is up to you, and of course, to them. You can choose how to interact, but the more conscious you are about the patterns that influence your behavior, the more likely it is that your choices and the lessons that you get from them will be positive. If your choices are formed only by your unconscious, however, and you are unaware of the archetypal energies influencing you, you will be more likely to act out of insecurity and defensiveness. By remaining aware of the archetypal energies, you stay conscious of both your divinity and your potential and the everyday world. Through your archetypes, you will find your own middle way, the path of your sacred contract. The child, guardian of innocence. The child archetype is our beginning point. We most easily identify with the child, especially after several decades of popular books and workshops on the inner child. This archetype establishes our perceptions of life, safety, nurturing, loyalty, and family. Its many aspects include the wounded child, the abandoned or orphaned child, the dependent child, the innocent child, the nature child, and the divine child. These energies may emerge in response to different situations in which we find ourselves, yet the core issue of all the child archetypes is dependency and responsibility. When to take responsibility, when to have a healthy dependency, when to stand up to the group, and when to embrace communal life. The stages of growing up, from coming to the age of reason at about 7, to entering adolescence at around 13, to reaching the official age of adulthood at 21, represents Pleiades of spiritual and physical maturation. When we are completely dependent from birth to age 7, we develop the first skills for taking care of ourselves, our bodies, and our possessions. At age 7, we begin learning what it means to be responsible, not just for our belongings, but for our actions and deeds as well. Through ages 7 to 13, we develop further emotionally as we are introduced to larger issues of morality, ethics, loyalty, and the rules of relationships. During adolescence, we become self-aware, self-conscious, and self-centered. We become aware of, if not consumed with, the power of our mind, the pull of our heart, and the passion of our body. During these wild years, images of all that you could be or all that you fear, you will never become also step up to the fore. During your late teens and early 20s, you discover your vulnerabilities as an adult along with your strengths and talents. You make substantial choices about your life, and even though you will doubtlessly change your mind many times, or circumstances will reroute you, this is the beginning of your real contact with the world of physical responsibility separate from your tribe. Finally, the power of the spirit emerges around the age of 21. As you begin to see beyond the physical aspect of life, to find symbolic meaning in your actions, from political activism to social idealism, to love and spiritual exploration. Around age 28, you'll naturally transition into the next cycle of your life as an interconnected, responsible adult. The process that I have described is, of course, how we ideally mature. Because of the complex challenges of everyday life, however, this spiritual maturation varies for most people. From an archetypal point of view, when these cycles are not followed in some way, adults will find it difficult, if not impossible, to be responsible for themselves in the physical world and to create successful relationships. Your inner child will exhibit aspects of the wounded or orphan child and will reflect that, somewhere along the line, you did not receive the nurturing necessary for you to become responsible and independent. And so you may well spend the early years of adulthood trying to heal and compensate for these deficiencies. Confronting the child archetype within you awakens a new relationship with life, a fresh beginning. Regardless of which aspect of the child you relate to most intimately, this archetypal pattern brings you into contact with the untapped resources connected to creative thought. This is the core of the innocent child, the sensation that anything and everything is possible. As the guardian of your innocence, the child helps heal, repair, and put a stop to the inner-directed abuse of the wounded child. If you are consumed with the wounded, neglected, abandoned, or orphan child psyche, you will need to identify or initiate a new relationship or create enterprise that makes you appreciate your life. Ask your child what it needs in order to heal or feel nurtured or cared for. The child often inspires you to act out restrictive boundaries or to explore an adventure with the burdensome weights of the adult mind. Indulge some of these inspirations as a means of making contact with your inner child. Don't become over-attached to the wound. However, don't overindulge the child so that it becomes an inner brat, but give it the support it needs to grow up. The victim, guardian of self-esteem. Being a victim is a common fear. The victim archetype may manifest the first time you don't get what you want or need, are abused by a parent, playmate, sibling, or teacher, or are accused or punished for something that you didn't do. You may suppress your outrage at the injustice if the victimizer is bigger and more powerful than you. But at a certain point, you discover a perverse advantage to being the victim. You may be afraid to stand up for yourself, or you may enjoy getting sympathy. The core issue of the victim is whether it's worth giving up your own sense of empowerment to avoid taking responsibility for your independence. Many people in my workshops have described their victim as their most vulnerable aspect. Quote, "I felt that I was set up to be a victim," said Tim, "because I was never taught to fight back, but to avoid conflict. Avoiding conflict is certainly the wiser path, but only when you know you can stand up for yourself if you need to. Otherwise, you are running away, and I have always felt that I'm running away from something or someone. One time, when I was shopping, the salesperson gave me the wrong change. I had given her a $50 bill, but she handed me change for a $20. Yet I stood there saying nothing. I told myself that I didn't want to embarrass her, so I walked out of the store. As soon as I made it to the street, I almost exploded in anger at myself. Once again, I had allowed myself to be victimized. I saw it happen. I just stood by and allowed myself to get ripped off. And to make the situation worse, even when I told myself to go back in there and get the right change, I managed to talk myself out of it by saying they would never believe my story of the invisible $50 bill. Eventually, Tim realized he had to confront this victim energy because the quality of his life depended on it. I knew that as long as I could not or did not protect myself, I would always feel like a victim of something or another. And even if I were not being victimized, there would come a time when I would no longer be able to tell the difference. I made a commitment to myself to act on behalf of my own well-being, no matter how uncomfortable it made those around me. I soon learned that every action one takes after making a choice to protect oneself is a major action. One time, when I was at work, a guy asked me if I could run his errands for him. I had always said yes to him in the past, but this time I said no. Both of us stood looking at each other. I had shocked him as much as I had surprised myself. I told him I was not responsible for seeing that his work get done. A few weeks later, I noticed him as he was walking toward me down the hall. He got a smirk on his face and commented, "Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do my job." The moment he said that, all I could feel was respect for myself, and I knew from that point on that I could protect myself, not only because I could respond honestly, but also because I knew I could live with the consequences of my honesty. The victim archetype had come full circle within Tim's psyche, from being a symbol of weakness to being a reminder of his own strength. When he thinks of the victim now, he does not think in powerless terms, but measures what he will or will not do so that he never again feels taken advantage of. As Tim puts it, the victim archetype is the guardian of my personal boundaries. Before, what I recognized as personal boundaries were more like self-inflicted prison walls. It's amazing how your world changes when you feel that you can take care of yourself. The lessons associated with the victim archetype demand that you evaluate your relationship to power, particularly in your interactions with people with whom you have control issues and need to construct personal boundaries. The primary objective of the victim archetype is to develop self-esteem and personal power. When you are in a situation in which you feel threatened, or you suspect that you lack the appropriate social, professional, or personal power, take notice of that reaction physically, emotionally, and mentally. That is the intuitive voice of your inner victim. To help direct your responses to all of your experiences and relationships, say, "I am committed to my own empowerment. What choice can I make here that will serve my own empowerment?" Name the problem or threat you need to overcome and the power that you need to possess in order to do so. Keep your eye on the truth that everything and everyone in your life is there by contract to assist in your spiritual maturation. You have contracts with people who are directly connected to the victim archetype. Their primary role is to help you develop your self-esteem through acts of honesty, integrity, courage, endurance, and self-respect. Those people whose contracts are linked to empowering your victim will play or have played the leading roles in awakening you in an awareness of the value of these spiritual qualities and how essential they are to your being. The prostitute, guardian of faith. The act of prostitution is generally associated with selling one's body for money. But to my mind, that is perhaps the least significant example of the prostitute archetype. The prostitute thrives most bountifully in subtle ways and in ordinary everyday circumstances. It comes into play most clearly when our survival is threatened. Its core issue is how much you are willing to sell of yourself, your morals, your integrity, your intellect, your word, your body, or your soul, for the sake of physical security. The prostitute archetype also dramatically embodies and tests the power of faith. If you have faith, no one can buy you. You know that you can take care of yourself and also that the divine is looking out for you. Without faith, however, you will eventually meet the price you cannot turn down. The majority of prostitutes that I have met and continue to meet are men and women who are either in bad marriages or in miserable jobs. Their inability to move out of their toxic environments is totally tied to economics. Women have told me that they do not want to be middle-aged and single, or lose their social status, or to have to support themselves, so they stay in unhappy marriages. Men tell me this too, but not nearly as often. Both men and women say that they remain in jobs and make themselves miserable or sick, violate their ethics, or make them feel bad about themselves for the sake of financial security. Many people tell me how unhappy they are and that they are just waiting for the right moment in their lives to make the big break and follow their dreams. Most often, those are the people who ask again and again, but what exactly is my contract? If I only knew, I could get on with it. These people are actually hoping that I can direct them on a path that will guarantee them money and peace of mind. They want to hear that their contract will give them all the time in the world, all the money they need, while doing only what they want, a cabin retreat in the woods, and last but not least, a soulmate. They also never want to age. The energies and expectations of prostitute, child, and victim all have to be addressed. All power, whether from lottery winnings or spiritual visions, will draw you to some outside opponent who will try to buy, use, or contaminate you. When Jesus was met by Satan as he prayed and fasted in the desert, Satan offered to give him the entire physical world in exchange for the power Jesus now had within him. Likewise, every time you take one step on your path of personal empowerment, you will meet someone who will want to buy a piece of your soul to render you less powerful and themselves more powerful. A shadow characteristic of the human psyche in general is that we want to find the shortcuts in life, including shortcuts to our own empowerment. If we spot someone whose power appears as if it could be bought or shared, we will be attracted to it. A perfect example is the game of name wealth. I am a friend of Mr. and Mrs. Whoever Famous. The diluted energy that comes down this path of who's who is, for many, valuable enough for them to remain in a relationship long past the time the relationship has grown cold. Another expression of the prostitute archetype. Confronting the prostitute within you transforms this archetype into your guardian. It will watch over your relationship to faith. Think of the prostitute as the ally who puts you on alert every time you contemplate shifting your faith from the divine to the physical. Anytime you're in a crisis of faith, try to become mindful of your thoughts and fears. Name exactly what you are afraid of, especially those fears that try to talk you into compromising yourself in any way. The prostitute appears when you begin to believe that you could order your life if you just had the money to control the world around you and to buy just a bit of everyone in it. It appears when you stay in a relationship that is not good for you just because you don't want to be alone. It appears when you are asked to do something unethical or illegal for the good of the company. People who are meant to bring out the prostitute in you represent your most painful relationships because prostitute interactions make us confront our fears of survival, and they are often terrifying and humiliating. The prostitute archetype can act as a guardian that awakens you to situations in which you must decide to take up your bed and walk. Once you get away from a circumstance that costs you too much, money, energy, dignity, or time, lasting transformation is possible. The Saboteur, guardian of choice. Like the prostitute and the victim, the Saboteur archetype is a neutral energy within you that usually makes itself known through disruption. It can sabotage your efforts to be happy and successful if you're not aware of the patterns of thought and behavior that it raises in you. It can cause you to resist opportunities. The Saboteur is the mirror that reflects your fears of taking responsibility for yourself and for what you create. The Saboteur archetype may be the one most intimately connected with your ability to survive in the physical world. Fears of being without the basic needs in life, from food to home to a social and personal network, often provide this archetype with the power to haunt you. You can silence the Saboteur with acts of courage by following your intuition. It serves you brilliantly as a gut instinct that takes you directly to action based on hunches rather than on rational thought. To learn to experience that voice, you must respond to it. Only through response can you manifest the courage to expand your creative environment. Start with small choices, which may be life-transforming acts of will disguised as harmless impulses. The core issue for the saboteur is fear of inviting change into your life, change that requires responding in a positive way to opportunities to shape and deepen your spirit. Yet, it is impossible to stop the process of change. Deep in your tissue, you know that having power and using it necessitates change. And although many people want to have it all, they don't want to be all. All choices you make do not have the same potential to transform the environment of your life. The decision to meet a group of friends for dinner, as a rule, does not change your life as dramatically as the decision to get married, start a business, or move to Europe. The choice to respond to an inner voice that directs you to pursue your spiritual life is obviously one that can rearrange your familiar world. I am a great one to sabotage my self-esteem, Erin said. Instead of saying thank you to someone who pays me a compliment, I deflect the kind words being offered. I am forever discounting my talents. But this self-sabotage is the worst in my partnership. I have a wonderful partner, and when he tells me that he loves me or that he thinks I'm lovely, I tell him he's crazy. That's about as close as you can come to behavior that is directly trying to sabotage a relationship. He has challenged me on several occasions, asking me why I don't believe him when he tells me how he feels. I told him that I feel like I'm giving him a break, kind of like I'm telling him he doesn't have to do any acting to make me feel good. It's a lethal pattern that came right out of my shadow saboteur. Now, I am practicing to be conscious of when I am shortchanging myself, and I compliment myself all the time. It sounds like a game, but I'm not playing at all. I feel that the saboteur is now my chess partner, sitting right across the table from me. Every move I make, I look across that table to study their response. I am determined not to stand in the way of all that my life can be with my partner. Our life together is part of my highest potential, which means having the experience of wife and mother with someone I truly adore. Although our archetypal patterns are essentially neutral, they do have both light and shadow aspects. The word shadow itself suggests a dark, secretive, possibly malevolent countenance that looms in the background of our nature, ready to do harm to others as well as ourselves. A much more appropriate understanding of the shadow aspects of our archetypes, however, is that they represent the part of our being that is least familiar to our conscious mind. Whether the shadow becomes our friend or enemy depends largely upon ourselves, wrote Marie-Louise von Franz, Jung's closest colleague and confidant. The shadow is not necessarily always an opponent. In fact, it is exactly like any human being with whom one has to get along, sometimes by giving in, sometimes by resisting, sometimes by giving love, whatever the situation requires. The shadow becomes hostile only when it is ignored or misunderstood. And I so wish I had time to get into so much more of this, but we'll revisit all these topics another day. At the very end of this chapter, she tells the story of the wonderful Wizard of Oz as an archetypal adventure, presenting the challenges of survival that we all face on our yellow brick roads. And I'm going to read her synopsis here because I think gives a really good pictorial of these four primary archetypes that we all have, and we all know this story very well, or at least we all know this story. Dorothy, having completed her hero's journey, comes to terms with her four survival archetypes, and with the courage, consolidated her mind, heart, and will. Her most challenging adversary, the Wicked Witch, has proved to be the one who did the most to expand her soul. And so, Dorothy wakes up safe in her bed, right back in Kansas with the same foster parents with whom she had been so disenchanted at the beginning of the story. Only now, she embraces them wholeheartedly. Dorothy appears to be in the same physical reality, but is not. She is fully transformed. She emerges not as the frightened little orphan child, but as an intelligent, fully awakened heart consciousness in the same body. She has returned whole from chaos and her journey. Our work has essentially the same goal, By learning to recognize the archetypal patterns at work within your psyche, you can begin to view your life symbolically, rather than taking every interaction personally and viewing it on the physical plane. Like the lion, you will need courage to look at the victim archetype within you and learn to make it into your own ally. You need the heart that the Tin Woodman sought, so you can love yourself when you see the prostitute at work in your psyche and turn it into your advantage. And the intellect that the scarecrow prized so highly can work with your saboteur to recognize the warning signs that you are about to do yourself in. When you tie those together, you can, like Dorothy, use your will to transform the child within, whether abandoned, wounded, or dependent, into an empowered being capable of directing your own life with passion and skill. For then, you have the elements of the soul, the eternal self, and you are on your way to discovering your spiritual identity. And with that, everyone, I am out of here for today. We went a little longer than usual, but I thought it was worth it. I'm going to leave you with a song for today. This is Elephant Revival, The Obvious. Till next time, everyone. Love you all.
And if you're feeling the call to come for a week retreat-style Mystic Manor immersion, remember to go now and book your time to speak with me directly about stepping into the optimistic vortex at calendly.com/talk with Brandon while there are still spots left. Otherwise, I look forward to co-creating magic with you at the Mystic Manor.
Not shaking, sharp, been shaping dark. And the dawn was raised, the dim breaking, the truth are blazing, perfect phasing. Oh, taking it for the taking, for what's not bought is what's not made. And no, we will not take it, another lie, we will not take it. Chains will be unfettered, and lights still be shining above the tree line. No defeat when we join each other here. I heard it through the walls of the station. Steel and stone could not contain us. Beyond the bounds of a nation, steel and stone could not contain us. Shaking, sharp, been shaping dark. And the dawn was raised, the dim breaking, the truth all blazing, perfect phasing. I heard it through the walls of the station. Steel and stone cannot contain us. Beyond the bounds of the nation, steel and stone cannot contain us. La 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 la, not contain us. you.